you all are going to take my class for the next hour. So there's going to be some work to do, and there's going to be some quizzes, or one quiz, sorry, that's why you have your note card. And we're going to take you, or I'm going to take you from all the way through an hour's worth of how you can argue like an ancient Greek. So tonight's ancient Greek is Aristotle. And for those of you who don't know Aristotle, he was around back in 384 to 322 BC. He was a student of Plato. He was Alexander the Great's teacher, and he's considered the practical philosopher. So he liked to philosophize about things like economics and politics and ethics and rhetoric, which is going to be our topic tonight. So how many people have heard the term rhetoric and think it's a bad thing, right? So rhetoric is a noun, and it does have some negative connotations, but it has some positive ones too. So in the red, the negative connotations of rhetoric is that it's language designed to have a persuasive or impressive effect on its audience, but often regarded as lacking in sincerity or meaningful content, like big words, no substance, or it's deceptive and dishonest communication. So that's the bad stuff. The good stuff is that it's the art of using your language effectively in order to persuade other people. It's effective, persuasive speaking or writing, okay? So we're gonna be effective tonight. When Aristotle was around, the term rhetoric actually is what we refer to as his treatise on how to use language to persuade. Some people actually believe that it's really just a collection of the notes his students took when he was their teacher. But when Aristotle was a student of Plato in the earlier days, Plato was not a fan of rhetoric. So Plato was the guy in the red, the negative connotation. He thought rhetoric was seen as appealing to emotions, it didn't have enough facts, it was lacking legitimate content, it was not a good thing. He also thought the form of persuasion was considered immoral and dangerous and manipulative. So that's the lesson that Aristotle got from his professor. As time went on and Aristotle looked into this more, he really felt when he was a teacher that rhetoric was an art. And it was really meant as one person speaking to many instead of like a one-on-one conversation. And he really felt that there was room for emotional appeals when you were trying to persuade other people. And the speaker and writer, we should use the tools that we have available so that we can work with our audience and persuade them. So tonight we're going to talk about three things. What are these tools that Aristotle thought we all had? Do you guys have a preferred tool? And then how can you use those tools to persuade an audience? Okay? So in Aristotle's Rhetorical Toolbox, he believed that speakers and writers have three different appeals that they have at their disposal when they're trying to persuade their audiences. And these are words we're going to go over more in detail tonight. But logos is your logical reasoning. Ethos is the character and credibility of the speaker or the writer or the witness. And pathos is when you're appealing to an audience's emotion. Aristotle's philosophy with those three tools was that you needed to use them to be more effective when you were speaking. We need to understand what our argument intelligence is, much like we can understand what our emotional intelligence is. So what are your preferred rhetorical tools, and what are the preferred rhetorical tools of others, much like you're trying to figure out your own emotions and recognizing other people's emotions. So tonight, we're going to take a pop quiz. So what I'd like you to do, does everybody have an index card and a pen? Okay, take out your index card and just put number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm going to show you a series of 8 questions. I don't want you to think terribly hard on them. I want you to go with your gut reaction. There are different scenarios, 8 different situations where somebody might be trying to persuade you to do something. Which one, A, B, or C, is the most persuasive for you? So just record next to your numbers an A, a B, or a C. So here's your first one. We got puppies. You've got a friend trying to persuade you to change the brand of food you feed to your dog to good dog food. What's the most persuasive argument to you? The brand that you are currently using has been recalled twice in the last 5 years. Your friend's vet recommended it and feeds it to her own dog, or this picture from an ad that your friend shows you. A, B, or C, if you're going to switch your dog food. Number 2, I know there's a couple people in the audience that recognize this. You are the parent of a high school student who has to be on the bus to school at 6:45 every morning to get to school by 7:15, and you would really love it if high school would start later. What argument are you most likely to include in an email to the superintendent? 1, 90% of high schools in the entire country start at 7:45 or later. The American Academy of Pediatrics recommends teens start school no later than 8:30. A student in your community was a victim of a hit and run last school year when they were walking to the morning bus stop in the dark. All right, now we're in our homeowners association. You live in a community that does not have an HOA, but your neighbors are trying to gather enough signatures on a petition to start one. What argument would most likely get you to sign the petition? 7 out of 8 residents living in an HOA community rated the experience as positive, according to a recent survey. They cited things like increased property values, enhanced beautification and convenience. The Community Association Institute states that communities governed by HOAs around the globe are generally safer, cleaner, and house more responsible citizens than ones without an HOA. Or your neighbor shows you a picture of the backyard of this person and explains why an HOA can help stop this type of property depreciation. Number 4, your neighbor heard that smart meters are dangerous to her health and she wants to convince you to opt out of having one. What argument is most persuasive to you? A, since installing smart meters, residents have reported a 25% decrease in the number of birds and bees in the area. They've also noted a number of spontaneous fires starting near the meters. B, the World Health Organization classified wireless radiation like that as a 2B carcinogen based on studies linking electromagnetic field radiation to brain tumors. Or your neighbor heard of a lady in the community who began suffering from insomnia and headaches and leg cramps and respiratory problems and nosebleeds after the smart meter was installed. Number 5, your county has a law banning liquor stores within 100 feet of a swimming pool. A local business owner has proposed to open a wine and beer store within 75 feet of your community swim club, but needs you to grant a waiver. Which argument is most persuasive? 10 years ago, a neighboring county lifted the liquor store near a pool ban, and since that time, there have been 0 pool drownings due to alcohol consumption. Or B, the National Beer Wholesalers Association and the Wine and Spirits Wholesalers of America have recently lobbied Congress to remove unnecessary restrictions. Their studies have found no link between liquor store location and hours and DUI or alcohol-related death and injury. Or, when the swim club holds the Friday adults-only barbecues, they often run out of beer. It would be very convenient to have the wine and beer store a few feet away if you're hosting a party, so you can dash over there to get more if necessary instead of overbuying in the first place. Believe it or not, this is a real story. It happened in our community. And we have our liquor store. Number 6, Jonathan Green is going to run for county council as an independent, and he wants your vote. Which of these might persuade you to vote for him? Statistics show that having an independent on a county council increases the productivity of all council members by 15%, and there are currently no independents on your council. B, Jonathan has a bachelor's degree from Cornell and a law degree from Harvard. Or C, he's a married father of 2 children who leads his son's scout troop and coaches his daughter's soccer team. He and his wife live in your community, and friends of yours say they host an annual barbecue for the neighborhood, and they're very warm and hospitable to everybody. 2 more. Number 7, Carolini College has been trying to entice you to apply to their graduate school. You had never heard of them before, but you do some research. Which of the following most likely persuades you to go ahead and apply? 9 out of 10 members of the class of 2017 graduated in May with full-time job offers paying above the national average. B, Carolini College placed first in the U.S. News and World Report college rankings for up-and-coming graduate programs. Or the campus photo in their brochure. This is a fake college. All right, ready? Last one. Very recent. You work for the U.S. Department of Puppy Training. You are an animal care specialist. You have been furloughed. You are working without pay. A coworker asked you to call in sick tomorrow with the rest of the group. Strikes are considered illegal for federal employees. What might persuade you to go on strike with them? Or call in sick, rather. 90% of federal employees who did the same thing during prior furloughs did not receive disciplinary action. The American Federation of Puppy Trainers, your national union, has assured your colleagues that calling in sick together on the same day is not an illegal strike. Or the coworker has really been struggling to pay for food, rent, and childcare during the furlough, and he's convinced it's going to take all of you to call in sick and leave the puppies without caretakers to get the attention of your lawmakers. He's pleading with you to help. All right, everybody have 8 answers? Okay, time to score. If you would count up how many A's you have, how many B's, and how many C's. And I will tell you what that means. And then go ahead and if you have a letter that has more than the rest, circle what that one is. All right. If you had more A's than the other 2, you are a logos person. So write down logos. If you had more B's than the other 2, you are an ethos person. And if you had more C's than the other 2, you are a pathos person. All right? How many logos people do we have in the room? Lots. How many ethos people do we have in the room? Okay. And how many pathos people do we have in the room? Like 3? You're special. We'll tell you why. All right, so those of you who are the mostly A people, you like to see facts and figures that support the speaker or writer's point. You like data, you love charts, graphs, reports, and solid reasoning. Does that sound like the A folks? Yes. Yes? All right. These are the ads you like back in the day. 33% more beef than government standard. Hormel chili, America's favorite, 2-to-1. You're gonna, all you A people, you fell for this, you buy Hormel chili. You also joined Verizon.
Yes, actually.
Yes. Okay. Did you see that map when you? They're naughty. Our B people, our ethos people, you are impressed by the expertise or credibility of the speaker, writer, or witness, and titles and credentials matter to you. You like that stuff that's on the resume. Does that sound like you? Some of the B people? Mm-hmm. You're an ethos person and you were going to go smoke back in the day. You bought Camels because doctors smoke Camels. Okay? And you use Colgate because it's the #1 brand recommended by dentists. So those are my ethos folks. Pathos. There's like 3 of you in the room. You love stories and anecdotes that tug at your heart, or things that fire you up or make you laugh. and you really want to know something that affects real people. You want to hear the stories about things that have affected real people. You want to feel like you belong. You would drink Coca-Cola back in the day because you could join the Get Together Club if you were a Coca-Cola drinker. And this ad from BMW about not drinking and driving really spoke to you. So how do we use all of this stuff in 2019 to persuade our audiences? The first thing we need to do is we got to know our genre. So Aristotle felt like there were 3 genres of rhetoric back in the day. The epidectic genre, where you're thinking about ceremonies like graduation speeches or eulogies. The forensic genre, where if you were in a courtroom, you're trying to prove guilt or innocence, or perhaps you were in the principal's office. And the deliberative genre, this would be like your county council testimony, like where you're going to support or oppose something. Modern day genres look more like this. This is where we're out trying to persuade and argue these days. We have our posts on Facebook and Twitter. We are having an argument with our spouse, our neighbors, friends, coworkers. We're writing letters to the editor. We're marching, or we're testifying and advocating at different kinds of meetings. The other thing we need to do is know the rules. So whatever the genre is, we've got to figure out what the rules are if we're going to be effective. What's 140 to 280? What's that rule? Anybody know? Characters in a tweet. So if you're going to post something to persuade people on Twitter, you got to get it down, right? It used to be 140 characters. Now they're giving us 280. 3 or 5. Anybody know what that is? Minutes. Where would we go and only have 3 or 5 minutes? County council, school board. 3 minutes if you are an individual, right? And 5 minutes if you're the only one speaking for your group. So you got to get your speech down to 3 or 5 minutes. 200 words. Letter to the editor. Different papers have different word count requirements. 200 is the Washington Post limit. You have to have your letter to the editor under 200 words. The Baltimore Sun didn't actually say. They just have a big block where you can copy and paste your letter, and I guess if they run out of space, they chop it up for you. And then 650 to 700. Also words. Op-eds. Yep. So you get a little more space if you're going to write an opinion piece for a newspaper. That is the Baltimore Sun's word count if you're going to actually write a full op-ed, almost like a column. There's also some other rules. What other rules might we have with our Facebook and our Twitter besides Facebook doesn't have a word count? What might be a good rule for Facebook?
Well, there's the elevator pitch that I was thinking of.
Yeah?
I don't know how long that is because it's not over, but
That's true. However long it is to get up the elevator or down the elevator. How many people have put something on Facebook or an email that they've regretted? Pause before sending or pause before posting. And if you're dealing with the fight with your spouse, what might a good rule be? What do they tell us? What? Walk into another room. Don't go to bed angry. You've heard that one before? Okay. Step 3 is to know your audience. How many people would have known what the person next to you's preferred tool was tonight before you took your quiz? 1. Most of us don't know, right? So we really can't prepare the best tool for an audience typically if we don't know them very well, because we don't know if they prefer the data and the statistics kind of stuff, or if they want to hear all the impressive credentials, or if they want a really good story. We don't really know. But we can research some other things depending on the audience that we're going before. What happens if you were going to go to the school board or the county council? Can you research those people? Yeah. So they usually have bios on their website, and you can look up their background and what political party they're a part of, perhaps, where they went to school, like anything they've posted. So if you know you're going before a particular group of people and you have access to Google and what you can find out about them, go ahead and check them out and figure out what might impress them or appeal to them. So you can know a little bit about your audience, but not necessarily that tool. And then step 4 is avoiding your own argument intelligent blind spot. So when I was on the school board, we serve as the administrative hearing judges for employees and students who have appeals. So if somebody was terminated or they got suspended, they had to come before the board to try to argue their case and get their job or their suspension revoked. And we had 9 people on our school board in Anne Arundel County where I live, and we had to have 5 people vote in your favor to overturn your suspension or your termination. The people would come to us and speak to us. Your preferred tool is typically what you use. So if you're, my 3 storytellers in the room, if you're gonna come and tell stories about how tragic it was when this happened to you and your child, and what's gonna happen if they don't get their suspension revoked, and you've got this big elaborate story, and we are a part of your body that's going to decide and rule on you, what's gonna happen? Because there's just 3 of you, and there's tons of us that love logos and ethos, right? Are we gonna overturn your suspension or your termination? Probably not, if you're only using the argument appeal that matters to you. So we want to avoid our own blind spot. Another thing that people tend to assume before a deliberative body or somebody that you're arguing to, even one-on-one, is that women like stories. So often we would have folks come in and tell us stories because we were predominantly female school board, and it didn't really work on us because when we take the quiz, we had a lot of logos people on our board, and we had some ethos people, and we had a couple people that were pathos, and you could tell because they had the Kleenex by their microphone. Somebody would come and they would have to cry. But if somebody just came and talked to us and tried to persuade us with stories, it just really didn't work. It wasn't effective for the body. So the assumption that women are attracted to pathos and stories isn't necessarily true. Did we have any men who were pathos people in here? Yeah. So now I want to talk a little bit about strategy. So if you are going to actually go and try to argue in front of somebody, whether it's your boss, your spouse, or a real body like a school board or a county council, the power of 3 is really important. The first power of 3 is that you need to use your logos, your ethos, and your pathos in your testimony or in your writing or your speech. So if you are attracted to logos and data, then you want to make sure that you find some ethos and pathos to tuck in there. Now, what happens if you only have 3 minutes? That's a lot to fit in 3 minutes. So another strategy we could use, also the power of 3. Bring 2 friends, okay? So you got 3 minutes, now you got 9. So you have 3 minutes, you can do your data, your logos, you can have a friend that's into ethos that can come and talk about that and bring in all the expert witnesses. You refer to them because you can't bring them along, but you would quote them or mention them in your speech, and then you could have somebody close with the story. So that's how you can work the power of 3. So either ethos, pathos, logos in your own, letter to the editor, op-ed, or conversation in the elevator with your boss, or going to a body like the County Council School Board, bring 2 friends. The other thing you want to do is use your best logos, your very best logos. How many people just go to Google to find their information? And what happens? You have your first page of hits, right? And you pick those. You also go to different news sources. We have favored news sources, preferred news sources. How many people have seen this chart before? Okay. So this is a media bias chart. A couple of different groups have put it out. You start over on the left side, you have far left are your liberal news sources, far right are your typical conservative news sources. In the middle, they try to stay away from partisan bias. People have different opinions of these publications, whether or not they're doing a good job at that, but they're trying to stay neutral. So if you want to avoid offending somebody you're talking to who's more liberal or more conservative, stay in the middle and stay up toward the top where you have more mainstream instead of the bottom where you have mostly noise. Facts reporting sources at the top. Serious quality problems at the bottom is what it says if you can't read it. So pick good sources. The other thing that you can do is change the way you're doing your searches. And I have a colleague in the English division that can do a whole hour lecture on this, which is fantastic. But I just wanted to show you one little trick that you can try the next time you're on Google. That smart meter question that we had for our quiz, if you wanted to prepare a smart meter argument and you want to kind of filter out all the miscellaneous Google stuff, you can add at the top cite, S-I-T-E colon, and I wanted to know what maybe educational institutions had done research on regarding smart meters. So I put cite colon edu, and you can see my search hits were all .edu education groups. You can do the same thing if you want to know what the government has to say about smart meters. So you can have smart meters cite colon .gov for gov. If you need nonprofits, typically they're .orgs, you add an org. So there's different ways to do searching so that you filter out things that might have bias or things that are not quality sources for your logos. So that's just a way to filter out some of your searches. The other thing we need to do is bring our best ethos to the room or to our writing. What are your relevant qualifications? Does that matter? Is it important to that group when you introduce yourself, whether it's in your writing or in your speaking? Do you need to tell people why what you're about to say is worth listening to? Do you seem to know what you're talking about? Have you done your research? Have you practiced? Are you coming across as trustworthy and real? Are you being genuine? Are you coming from a place of wanting to do good versus evil? And then how are you packaging your message? This is where the English teachers come in and the speech teachers. How do you package your message when you're speaking? What kinds of packaging is important? The grammar, spelling, punctuation, all of those things matter. If you're speaking and you're using a PowerPoint, hopefully I don't have typos in mine. You want to make sure that your speaking and your writing is effective with grammar, spelling, punctuation, etc. Also, how do you present yourself? What do you look like? What are you wearing? What does your document look like? What kind of formatting? You have funky fonts, you have weird margins, like professionalize it for a professional audience if that matters, and change the way you dress if that matters to your group. And then for those of us that struggle with pathos, most of the room needs to work on this part. How do we create those stories that people want to listen to? The first thing you want to look at are the 3 C's. Context, you want to set the scene so people understand what you're talking about without a bunch of details, especially if you only have 3 minutes. And then the characters, who's involved, And the conflict, where's the difference of opinion that you're trying to persuade other people about? And then you also want to try to engage the five senses. So when you're writing that story that you're going to share in person or on paper, can you help people picture the visual? Can you help them imagine what it sounds like if the sound is important? Does taste matter? Smell, touch, like set the scene, but try to use those senses. So believe it or not, it's time to wrap up. So let me summarize what we talked about, and then we'll do a little Q&A. So if you're going to argue like an ancient Greek, this Greek being Aristotle, then I want you to use all of the quality tools at your disposal. So I want you to use some logos. I want you to get it from a good source. I want you to use unbiased media sources as best you can. I want you to share your own ethos, or if you don't really have any ethos, because sometimes we don't, right? We're not the experts, then you can quote someone who does. And then your pathos, I think all of us need to work on our storytelling a little bit, but we want to make sure that you include some stories because somebody that you're arguing with might really need to hear a story. I also want you to avoid your argument blind spots. We're going to revert to our favorite rhetorical appeal. I'm a logos girl. I'm going to get you some data, but I need to remember to include the ethos and the pathos. Remember your power of three. So not only including those three things, but bringing two friends with you, having two other friends can post tweets, they can post Facebook posts, they can come to the meetings with you, they can also send letters to the editor. So there's ways to do that with your friends and get in more words. And then you're going to put your best ethos forward by respecting time limits and word counts, and you're going to proofread and practice. All right, that is arguing like an ancient Greek. Thank you.